Good morning to each and every one of you under the sound of my voice. This is Reverend William Holdipp from Faith Deliverance Center, Smith Hill, in the Isle of Bermuda. It is a pleasure one more time to bring to you a message from the Word of God. Today we'll be speaking from the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 to 10, and it reads thus. Paul speaking said, unless I should be exalted above measure, through the abundance of the revelations there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Paul said, therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities and reproaches, and necessities, and persecutions, and distress, for Christ's sake. When I am weak, then am I strong. You see, Paul had experienced the spiritual power of Christ. God had given Paul deep and intimate spiritual experiences. And there was a danger that he might begin to think too highly of himself. Therefore, God gave Paul a thorn in the flesh. My friend, Paul needed a thorn. Keep him ever mindful that he was no better than other men. He was totally dependent upon God despite the indescribable spiritual experiences. What was his thorn in the flesh? Now, the word thorn means either thorn or stake. It is generally taken to mean thorn in this verse. And there are many guesses as to what the thorn was. Some believe that it was some spiritual suffering, such as constant attacks by Satan or opposition by men, or occasional evangelistic failure, nor to keep Paul humble and on his faith before God, seeking supernatural strength. Some believe that it was some physical suffering, such as a recurring fever, for example, malaria, or epilepsy, or poor eyesight. But just what the thorn was is not known. The best guess seems to be some physical ailment. For suffering is what this passage is all about, according to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 16 to chapter 12 verse 10. Words flesh, strength, weakness, and infirmities are used. Although these same words could be used to describe spiritual sufferings, the context does not vary toward spiritual suffering. Compare also 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 10. Clearest description of the thorn is probably eye trouble, according to Galatians chapter 4, verse 13 to 15, Galatians chapter 6, verse 11, and 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 10. God had been stricken, or Paul had been stricken blind for 3 days at his conversion. He had been badly beaten and stoned several times, according to 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 24 to 27. A serious injury to his eyes, or for that matter to any other part of his body, could have occurred at any of these tragedies. Paul wanted deliverance and relief, wanted God to remove the thorn. Why? Because it pricked and bothered him, because it distracted him from a lay, but because it made him appear perfectly weak and sickly. Note that Paul prayed 3 times for God to remove the thorn. Jesus Christ had also prayed 3 times for the softening of the cross to remove, my friend. I'll go to Matthew chapter 26, verse 36 to 46. There were 3 reasons why God refused to remove the thorn from Paul's flesh. First, God warned Paul against being puffed up. Second, God wanted to reveal his power in Paul. Weaken the vessel. My God is glorified. My God, when the vessel really serves Christ, no God's answer to Paul. My grace is sufficient for thee. The presence, love, favor, and blessed God are sufficient. Help the believer walk through any suffering. For sufficiency means the power of strength to withstand any danger. God's grace within the believer can carry the believer through anything. In Paul's case, it was physical suffering. In our case, it may be either physical or spiritual attacks. But no matter, God's grace is sufficient to see us through whatever the thorn is. God is my strength, is my perfect in weakness. The weakened believer, more God can demonstrate his strength. If a man is self-sufficient, he does not need God. But if he is weak, he needs God to help, provision, and sufficiency of God. That most gladly therefore will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Note the point of this statement. Infirmities or weakness or purposeful. The believer suffers for a reason, that the power of Christ may be demonstrated and clearly seen in his life. Where rest means to fix a tent upon. Yea, that the power of Christ rests upon the soft believer, just as his Shekinah glory dwelt in the holy place of the tabernacle. What a glorious thought! The strength of Christ fixes itself upon and dwells within the believer, filling him with the Shekinah glory of God when he suffers. That God wanted to teach Paul to live for Christ's sake alone. When Paul suffered some infirmity or weakness, it gave Christ a chance to infuse power into Paul and to overcome the weakness for Paul. Paul's infirmity gave Christ an opportunity to prove himself. Therefore, Paul says that he took pleasure in infirmities, a general term meaning all kinds of sufferings and weakness, whether moral or physical. The power of Christ can overcome any weakness or temptation for the believer. Paul said he took pleasure in reproaches, whether ridicule, insult, slander, rumor, or whatever. Paul said he took pleasure in necessities, hardship, needs, deprivations, hunger, thirst, lack of shelter or clothing, or any other necessity. Paul said he took pleasure in persecutions, verbal or physical attack, abuse or injury. Paul took pleasure in distress, tight situations, perplexities, disturbances, anxious moments, inescapable problems and difficulties. My friend, when the believer is weak, he is strong. All by the power of Christ, and the power of Christ, my friend, is much stronger. No, the combined forces for mankind. The great need of the believer is to acknowledge his weakness before the Lord. When he does, Lord pours his strength into the believer's mind and heart. Lord empowers the believer to overcome and conquer all infirmities and weaknesses. Matthew chapter 19, verse 26, 2. For Jesus beheld them and said unto them, with men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. In Isaiah chapter 41 and verse 10, God said, fear thou not, I am with thee. Be not dismayed, I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will house thee, yea, I will hold thee with the right hand of my power. In Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 16, Paul wrote that he will grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with might by his Spirit in the inner man. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 27, Paul wrote, for God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. God bless you and God be with you. It's the prayer of our heart.